Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into 4 major breaking military news stories from around the world as of October 29th, 2025, stories that are defining global security and reshaping alliances in real time. From the Pacific standoffs to the growing tensions in Europe, the Middle East, and even cyber warfare developments that most people haven't yet noticed, the world's military landscape is undergoing a transformation unlike anything we've seen in decades. Each of these events is critical on its own, but together they form a chilling picture of a planet edging closer to confrontation. So let's take a deep look at what's really happening and what it all means for the future of global stability. The first story comes straight from the South China Sea, where tensions between the United States and China have reached a dangerous new level. Over the weekend, a U.S. Navy destroyer operating near the disputed Spratly Islands was intercepted by multiple Chinese warships in what officials are describing as one of the most aggressive maritime encounters this year. The U.S. vessel, part of the Navy's 7th Fleet, was reportedly conducting a freedom of navigation patrol when it was shadowed by 2 Chinese Type 055 destroyers and a smaller frigate. According to defense sources, the situation escalated rapidly after one of the Chinese ships maneuvered to cut across the American vessel's bow at dangerously close range, forcing the U.S. crew to take evasive action. Inside the ship, the tension was palpable. Sailors reportedly switched to full operational readiness, with radar and weapon systems on standby, as Chinese warships maintained an extremely close pursuit. The crew knew that even the slightest misstep could result in a collision or worse, an international incident that could set off a military chain reaction. Onboard communications described the situation as tense but controlled, with American officers maintaining professionalism while dealing with constant Chinese radio warnings to leave the area immediately. In the command centers back in Washington and Beijing, officials scrambled to control the narrative, each side accusing the other of provocation. Beijing declared that the U.S. violated its sovereign waters, while the Pentagon reaffirmed its position that these are international waters under the law of the sea. Military analysts have pointed out that these confrontations are becoming alarmingly frequent. In just the past month, the U.S. has conducted 3 major patrols in the region, and China has responded each time with increased aggression, including aircraft flyovers, radar targeting, and naval blockades. Experts warn that both nations are now engaged in a psychological and strategic standoff, testing each other's resolve while signaling to allies that neither side is backing down. With both fleets heavily armed and tensions rising, it feels like the South China Sea is one minor incident away from igniting a larger regional crisis that could pull in multiple countries from Japan to Australia to the Philippines. Meanwhile, the second breaking story unfolds in Eastern Europe, where NATO and Russia are once again facing off in the skies over the Baltic Sea. Early this morning, multiple NATO air defense networks detected Russian strategic bombers flying unusually close to Allied airspace. Within minutes, NATO scrambled fighter jets from Poland, the UK, and Germany to intercept and escort the Russian aircraft away. According to military officials, the intercepted aircraft included 2 Tu-95 Bear bombers and 4 Su-27 escort fighters. The Russian planes were flying with their transponders off, a deliberate violation of international air safety regulations, and were approaching the edge of NATO airspace before turning back toward Kaliningrad. This type of aggressive probing has become a hallmark of Russia's posturing since the Ukraine war began. But the frequency and scale of these incidents have grown significantly over the past few months. NATO commanders believe Moscow is testing response times and coordination between allied nations, essentially mapping out how fast Western defenses can mobilize in case of a full-scale attack. It's also a psychological tactic, a reminder that Russia's long-range strike capability remains intact even after heavy losses in Ukraine. But there's a darker interpretation circulating among intelligence analysts that Russia is preparing for something bigger. With winter approaching and Ukraine's counteroffensive slowing, the Kremlin could be using these flights to distract NATO while repositioning troops for a new offensive. Inside NATO headquarters in Brussels, there's a sense of controlled urgency. Commanders are careful not to overreact, but are quietly reinforcing air defense units and surveillance operations along Europe's eastern flank. The alliance is also accelerating the deployment of next-generation radar systems and drones to monitor Russian movements around the clock. While no shots have been fired, the message is clear: the sky over Europe has become the front line of a modern Cold War, and the more Russia pushes these boundaries, the more NATO will respond with power and precision. The risk of a miscalculation, however, is always there. All it would take is one pilot misreading radar, or one missile lock interpreted as an attack to trigger a deadly escalation neither side truly wants. The third story comes from the Middle East, where Israel has reportedly conducted one of its largest airstrikes in months, targeting Iranian weapons depots and command centers in Syria. Satellite images analyzed by multiple defense agencies confirm massive explosions in the outskirts of Damascus and near the Syrian city of Homs, suggesting that several underground facilities were hit. According to sources in the Israeli Defense Forces, the strikes were aimed at stopping the transfer of precision-guided missiles from Iran to Hezbollah, the militant group operating out of Lebanon. Inside Syria, eyewitnesses reported fireballs lighting up the night sky as multiple Israeli jets streaked overhead. Syrian air defenses attempted to intercept the incoming missiles, but most failed to make contact. This strike comes at a time when tensions between Israel and Iran are already near boiling point, with both sides accusing each other of sabotage and assassinations. Tehran has vowed to respond at a time and place of its choosing, which raises fears of retaliation not only against Israel but also against Western assets in the region. The United States has reportedly raised the alert level for its forces in Iraq and the Gulf following the strikes, preparing for potential Iranian proxy attacks on bases or oil infrastructure. Inside Israel, security has been tightened across major cities. The public is on edge, aware that Iran's network of allied militias from Iraq to Yemen could retaliate at any moment. But for Israel, the calculus is clear. Allowing Iran to establish a permanent weapons network in Syria poses an existential threat. The country's leadership believes preemptive strikes are necessary, even if they risk regional escalation. The United Nations has condemned the strikes as violations of Syrian sovereignty, but Israel argues that the greater threat lies in allowing Iranian weapons to reach the borders of Lebanon and the Golan Heights. As a result, the skies over Syria have become a silent battleground, one where drones, stealth jets, and advanced radar systems fight an invisible war every night. The fourth and final breaking story takes us into a new kind of battlefield, the digital one. Over the past week, a coordinated cyberattack has been detected targeting multiple Western defense contractors and government systems. Cybersecurity agencies from the US, UK, and Australia have traced the attack back to a state-sponsored group believed to be operating out of North Korea, although some reports suggest collaboration with Chinese cyber units. The attackers attempted to breach secure communication networks, steal sensitive military data, and disrupt logistics software used by defense suppliers. While no classified data appears to have been stolen, officials say the attack was sophisticated and persistent, lasting several days before being neutralized. Inside intelligence circles, the real concern is the timing. These cyber intrusions coincide with rising military tensions worldwide, suggesting they may not be isolated acts of espionage, but part of a larger strategic operation. Cyber warfare has become the silent weapon of the 21st century, invisible, deniable, and capable of crippling entire nations without firing a single shot. The U.S. Cyber Command has since issued a global alert to all allied nations, warning them to strengthen firewalls, update encryption, and monitor any signs of intrusion. Experts fear that the next major conflict won't begin with missiles, but with malware, a digital strike designed to paralyze communications, air defense systems, or even critical infrastructure like power grids. Inside these cyber defense centers, the atmosphere is intense. Analysts monitor multiple threat maps in real time, watching red dots flicker across continents as intrusion attempts rise and fall. For them, the war is already underway, one fought in silence, with keystrokes instead of bullets. The realization is sobering. As nations prepare for traditional wars at sea and in the air, another war is already raging online, hidden from the public but every bit as dangerous. Governments are investing billions into cyber defense programs, knowing that in the modern era, data can be as decisive as firepower. Taken together, these four stories reveal a troubling pattern. Across every region, from Asia to Europe to the Middle East, the world's major powers are testing limits and pushing boundaries. China is asserting dominance at sea, Russia is probing the skies, Israel and Iran are clashing in the shadows, and unseen cyber armies are probing the digital frontiers. The world is no longer divided into separate conflicts, it's interconnected, each flashpoint influencing the next. A naval standoff in the Pacific can shape Russia's calculations in Europe. A cyberattack on defense networks can disrupt real-world operations. It's all part of a new global chessboard where every move carries enormous consequences. What makes this moment especially dangerous is how unpredictable it has become. Unlike the Cold War, where rival blocs operated under clear deterrence principles, today's conflicts are more fluid, involving state and non-state actors, mercenaries, hackers, and even artificial intelligence systems making rapid tactical decisions. The rules of engagement are constantly shifting, and no one is entirely sure where the next spark might come from. Still, amid all the tension, there are ongoing efforts to prevent things from spiraling out of control. Back-channel diplomacy between Washington and Beijing continues, even after maritime confrontations. NATO maintains communication hotlines with Moscow to avoid accidental escalation. And in the Middle East, secret negotiations are reportedly underway involving regional powers trying to cool down the Israeli-Iranian confrontation. These are fragile lines of communication, but they might be the only things keeping the world from tipping over the edge. In the end, these four breaking military stories are not just headlines, they're warnings. They remind us that power is being tested everywhere, and the balance that has kept global peace for decades is being stretched thin. The South China Sea remains a flashpoint for future naval conflict. The skies over Europe are once again contested by old rivals. The Middle East is teetering on the brink of another shadow war, and cyberspace is emerging as the next frontier of military dominance. Each of these arenas represents a challenge to international stability, and together they define the most complex geopolitical environment of our time. As the world watches these events unfold, one thing becomes clear: the age of single-front wars is over. The battles of the future will be fought simultaneously on land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace, each one influencing the other in ways we're only beginning to understand. Whether these tensions lead to open conflict or managed coexistence will depend on how world leaders act in the months ahead. But as of now, October 29, 2025, the message from the global stage is unmistakable. The world is armed, alert, and one miscalculation away from history repeating itself in ways we all hope to avoid.